I want to say welcome for those of you who are here, of course. For those of you who are watching online, we realize you guys are with us as well, and we want to thank you certainly, as well as those who are going to watch this or listen to this a later time. You're not with us physically and technically, but you're with us in a sense as well, so we want to say a welcome to you as well. And we are in the middle of this series called Better, as you guys know if you've been here in any of the last few weeks. And everybody wants something better in their life. And we all go through hard times, we all go through challenges, but sometimes you have a good time, and I have a question for you. How does it actually feel when you go through a great time? Let's say you have a string of, great days or great weeks, and everything's just kind of lining up roses for you. Do you feel like you're floating on cloud nine? Do you feel blissful and totally secure, and like it's just going to continue on for the rest of your life? Maybe you feel that way. I don't actually get that. You know what I get? This weird, awkward feeling like, uh-oh, too many things are going right. When is the shoe going to drop, right? When is the hammer going to drop on me? And maybe I'm the only one who's like that, but there's a certain amount of anxiety when everything is going right. It's not just when everything is going right. It's also when, when somebody's trying to build you up and encourage you and compliment you, and you're kind of like, that's really great. But my wife experienced this week because my wife's very talented. She's a nurse. She got a new role at her job, and so new floor, new division in nursing. And she's the coordinator of this new thing that's developing, brand new, just starting from scratch. So she gets to build it from scratch. And she's going to do a great job. But when she came in on our first day, which was this week, the main doctor who had a hand in helping her get hired was building her up in front of the whole division and saying, this woman is amazing. She's going to do fantastic things, and you got to hear from her. But right now, let's just hear from her on what's her leadership philosophy. And my wife is amazing, and she's competent and talented, but I can tell you she doesn't have an elevator pitch for her leadership philosophy. And so she's like, maybe we'll do that a little later. She didn't want to be set up for the fall, right? And I'm the same way. In fact, last week, I had somebody come to me and just say encouraging words, which I'm always very appreciative of. And he was actually talking about this series and saying, hey, these lessons have been very good. And in fact, I feel like they've been getting better and better and better. And I was like, don't say that. That's like the jinx. And now I feel like all you can do is be disappointed probably from this point forward. But he obviously meant it in a very encouraging way. To get up here is hard. I think everybody who's been up here, you can probably attest to that, especially if you're sharing something that's close to your heart or that's very personal. It can be very challenging. Many people have a fear of public speaking as well. And, I was looking into that this week and just kind of researching, like, what is it about us that we're so afraid to get in front of a big group and basically, speak or bare our soul or whatever it is. And I was researching, and it turns out that many people think that it's because as people, we're such social creatures that it's just unnerving to us, because what we're afraid of is we're afraid of judgment. We're afraid of being looked down upon, being even, ultimately outcasts of society or our peer group. And that's just a very frightening thing to us because, again, we're social creatures. That influences our well-being and our access to resources and all these things. And I thought that's true. I don't know if that's true for you, but it's true for me. And whether you have that particular fear of public speaking or not, you probably have experienced this on some level in some part of your life. Like maybe you've been at your job and there's a big meeting and all the bigwigs are there and you've got to be part of it, and it's a conference or a teleconference, and you're just afraid of like saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? Maybe you've experienced that. Or you ever have the thing where you go around the room and all you have to do is say your name and what division you're in? Do you ever get nervous in that situation? Like I'm up here speaking right now in front of you guys, but I've been really nervous in that situation. All I have to do is say my name. I'm like, am I going to get my name right? It's questionable. Or maybe you've done the thing where, this is a little bit old school, but you call up someone on the phone to ask them on a date. Have you ever done that? Dial the number, your heart's beating, and you dial it, and you're like, don't pick up, don't pick up, don't pick up, don't pick up, so I can get out of this. I have done that. I first asked my now wife on a date by text. I'm not bragging. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a bit, but I avoided the whole don't pick up scary thing. Or, maybe it's that you're reaching out to somebody and you're trying to build a friendship or invite them to church, for example. That's a very unnerving, vulnerable type feeling. Anything where you have to kind of push something to a new level of relationship or vulnerability, it can be an unnerving feeling, because I think that we're just wired that we want the approval, we want the connectedness, we want the belonging, and anything that puts that even possibly in jeopardy, it's just scary to us. And again, perhaps you can relate to that on some level. We all have these fears. And the funny thing is, nobody can see your fears. We all have them, and they're a huge part of our life. They really drive, I think, a lot of our behavior, our mindset, and yet they're invisible. And maybe the only time somebody can see that is if you're a person who blushes, right? And actually, I read, interestingly enough, that some people think that people who blush have a social advantage because the people around them can actually see when they're embarrassed or feel vulnerable, and that makes them feel more trusted. Like those people are more trusted, which I think is interesting. And I just had this weird thought today I'll share with you, because why not, this week, that what if we had our fears and we had a digital readout right here, like on our forehead. Like, I'm afraid that you're going to, judge me. I'm afraid that you're going to hate me. I'm afraid that you're going to defriend me or just think I'm a dork or whatever. And would that make things easier? I don't know. Maybe it'd make things worse, especially if someone said, yes, I am judging you right now. You are a dork. That's probably worst case scenario. But I do think my observation is we do direct a lot of our energy towards these types of fears. I know I do, and I think it's pretty common, actually. And so whenever you direct a bunch of your energy somewhere, you don't have it available for other things. You realize that, right? You only have a limited amount of energy and resources. And so when you're afraid of something, your energy is getting diverted. And I also wonder just how many opportunities and good spiritual risks we miss out on because we're afraid of that social fall. It's a big deal. And so the story of me dating, the awesome story of me dating, I did start with a text, like I said. That didn't go over very well. I got a long pause, which was actually worse than calling, and then saying don't pick up. I got a long pause, and I was like, oh no, either she's not at her phone, which is not likely, or I misjudged this whole thing. So I went in to do damage control, again by text, avoiding the difficult, and I was like, sorry if this was awkward, and this is my now wife, by the way. Sorry if this was awkward, but, so we had to have a talk, and I was like, listen, okay, misstep, sorry. I don't want to jeopardize our friendship, because we're friends, so I'm just going to back way off of this, and if things ever change in your mind, you got to just let me know, okay? And so we continued our friendship, and some months later, as I gradually wore down her defenses, we had a get-together, and basically, she was very nervous, but she's like, hey, I'm going to let you know, things have changed. I feel different, and she basically gave me a complete green light, right? So if you're like looking to date or move your relationship forward, that's as good as it gets, really. Like, she was like, anytime. So I set up a date that Friday. It was the end of a long work week, and I was tired. Like, I was really, really tired. My wife will tell you, and she just laughs about the story. Anyway, I was tired, and I had no plan. I just kind of wanted to get it. I just wanted to do it and move forward. So I had no grandiose romantic plan. I'm just asking her to date steady, to be my girlfriend is what we were looking for, what I was looking for. So we went out to eat, and I'm kind of like looking for the right time that kind of feels good, and I felt like I just couldn't feel the moment, and maybe I was just so tired. I just felt like, honestly, I felt like I was drugged. I was so lethargic. And I wasn't drugged. That's just how I felt. And so then I was like, do you want to go on a walk? And so we went walking down Riverside. Some of you have been to Riverside. We went to Memorial Park and walked along the river there. And she laughs about it now because she tells me, she's like, you were just speed walking. Like, you were just walking like this. And because every moment I was like, well, it's not this moment, so maybe if I keep walking, there's going to be another one a little further down the line. And I just couldn't find the moment. And I was getting more tired and more tired. and which didn't seem possible. So finally, I was like, okay, let me just take you home. We go home. I'm like about to crash. And then eventually, I'm like, okay, Paul, are you going to leave this date and not ask her to be your girlfriend? Like, that's where I was in the moment. Like, that is ridiculous. So I had that little internal battle, and I was like, I got to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom, pulled myself together. I was like, come on, man, just don't even worry about it being good anymore. Just do it. Like Shia LaBeouf, like, just do it. And so I sat down, and this is not an exaggeration. I was like, will you be my girlfriend? With no preamble. And she's like, yes, thank you for asking. And so that's how it was the most anticlimactic, unromantic thing ever. But here's the weird thing. She's like, and now I know you're super tired, so you probably just want to go home, right? I was like, actually, all of a sudden I feel okay. And so then we went on another date, and we went to the movies. So it was like the latest date we ever had, because it was like the end of our date. But I had all this energy, like I was amped back up. I was like, where did this come from? So I think it's an illustration of something. I think it's an illustration that, I had all this nervous energy, and I think some of it was just fear and ambiguity about what's going to happen, even though I had been totally green-lighted, which is ridiculous for my sake, but I'd been totally green-lighted, but I had all this nervous energy, and it was just, I think it was like sapping the life and energy away from me. And as soon as I asked her and got past that, then there was no more fear, and I was like, great, let's move forward. I got all my energy back, and so I was afraid of this fall, and it had me kind of like tied up and constricted, and I just wondered, like, how many other times in my life is that what's happening to me, where my energy is just getting like drained out of my system by this fear of a fall, fear of a social fall of some kind. And not only that, but just how many opportunities have I maybe not taken? How many good risks have I not taken because I was bound up again with this fear? And I do wonder, like, for the rest of us as well, like, how often does that happen? What amount of your energy actually goes towards this fear? And what kind of opportunities for growth? What kind of opportunities to push in, like Jonathan was talking about earlier, and be vulnerable and take your relationship to a next level, a deeper level? How many of those do we potentially miss or simply not fall short of? I know for me, I bet if I would just go back and try to look at my life, I bet those stack up pretty deep, actually. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And I only have one simple point today. And that is, to live life to the full, don't fear the fall. To live life to the full, don't fear the fall. Because Jesus said in John 10:10, I have come that they may have life, and life to the full. And a life full of fear, where you're afraid of a fall, is not going to be life to the full. Because your energy is going to be drained away. And you are going to stop short of taking spiritual risks that cause you to grow and mature and become more vulnerable and to initiate with somebody and to be open-spirited and to be generous with yourself and your heart. So to live life to the full, don't fear the fall. And we're actually going to read from Hebrews today. We're going to continue reading from Hebrews as we have been in the rest of this series. And we're going to look in chapter 2. You can actually go ahead and turn there in your Bible if you'd like to. It's page 846 and 847. I also have the scripture on the screen here that you can read along with. We're just going to look at five verses, actually. But in chapter 2 of Hebrews, it's actually amazing because chapter 1, the writer makes the case that basically Jesus is greater than the angels. And he uses passage after passage from the Old Testament. In fact, Jonathan read one of them this morning in Psalm 8, passage after passage, just talking about how he's above the angels, who people at that time looked at angels as, man, they're right up there underneath God. And what all that we've read in the last several weeks is about how Jesus is up here, right? He's transcendent. He is the one through whom the universe is made, and he's going to inherit all things, and he's sustaining all things right now, and he's the exact representation of God's being, and it's all about how Jesus is up here, right? That's what we've looked at for the last 5 weeks, so if you've been around, hopefully you remember at least some of that. But in chapter 2, it's so interesting because he goes and does the exact opposite. And he says, but Jesus, or it says of Jesus, you, speaking of God, you made him lower than the angels for a short time. And so it talks about how God allowed his son, Jesus, high up to be brought low, and to be brought lower than the angels for a short time. And it's just this amazing thing. In a sense, it's like this amazing transcendent son. He is allowed temporarily, because there was a plan and a purpose to this, but he's allowed to, in a sense, become low, to be demoted temporarily and for a purpose, right? To lose some privilege and prestige in a sense of where it looked like he was standing. He was allowed to be brought low. It was a lowering. And so it's this sacred mystery, in a sense, that Jesus, the Son, the central event in history is that he was brought low. It's called the incarnation, right? It means he was put in flesh, like flesh and blood, just like you and I are flesh and blood. And you can't over-spiritualize this, because the whole point is that it wasn't over-spiritualized. He was gritty. He had skin just like you and I. He experienced the same sort of pressures and struggles and imperfections and sicknesses and all those things that make life life. Jesus experienced that. He was brought low. And then, during his life, if you're familiar with the Gospels and the story of Jesus, you know that even after he was brought low and made flesh and blood, Jesus experienced probably the most shocking, infamous social fall in history. Because he was welcomed into Jerusalem in the last week of his life as a hero. And people were putting, palms in his path and saying, "Come on, King, come on." And then 5 days later, people were calling for him to be executed as a common criminal. The worst thing that could happen to you is a mark of shame and scorn and rejection by your peers and the people around you. And Jesus experienced that. In Isaiah 53, it says he was like one despised, like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised by the people around him, and we, just collectively we, esteemed him not, meaning we thought low of Jesus. Jesus was lowered, and then during his life, as the spotlight got shown on him, he took the most precipitous, drastic social fall that you could imagine. And that's profound. Not just profound that it happened, but what's profound is what resulted from it. And that's what I want to look at with you today. And I want to read 5 verses. And in these 5 verses, we'll see 3 things that resulted from Jesus being lowered and Jesus taking a fall. And we're going to learn from that. This is Hebrews 2. I think it's verse 9 is where we're starting. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels, now crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death, so that by the grace of God, he might taste death for everyone. In bringing many sons to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the author of their salvation perfect through suffering. Both the one who makes men holy, and those who are made holy of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers. And we're skipping to verse 14. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. So I don't know if you caught them, but there was 3 things in there that it says Jesus accomplished and achieved 3 victories that came through his lowering and his fall. And so we're going to go back through them because I want to make sure that you see them with me. The first is that Jesus was crowned with glory and honor. Jesus was crowned with glory and honor. The second is that he was made perfect. Jesus was made perfect. And perfect doesn't mean that he wasn't perfect. It means complete, perfectly mature, fulfilled his mission perfectly. And thirdly, Jesus destroyed him who holds the power of death. He did those things. He was crowned with glory and honor. He was made perfect. And he destroyed him who holds the power of death. Now, that's good news. It's amazing. But what's even more amazing is how he did these things. I'm going to walk back through the same things with you. And just note this. Why was he crowned with glory and honor? Why? Because he suffered death. Because he was laid low. How was he made perfect? Through suffering. How did he destroy him who holds the power of death? By his death. And so it's not just that Jesus, in spite of being lowered and taking a fall, achieved all these things. It's that he achieved all these things because he took a fall. I mean, that's just a profound thing. But there's one more thing in these same scriptures that I also want to draw your attention to. And that is how it impacts us. Here's the so what for me part of this. And it's just as amazing. It says he's crowned with glory and honor. And then just a little bit lower it says, in bringing many sons to glory. So it's not just that the glory got applied to Jesus, but in a sense the glory spills over to us. The author of their salvation perfect through suffering, and it says, both the one who makes men holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So it's not, again, not just that Jesus is made holy, but somehow we got made holy in the same process by virtue of the same suffering and the same death. And then destroy him who holds the power of death. And guess what? Same thing again. Free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. So him destroying the power of death was not just for Jesus, it spilled over to you. And so amazingly enough, all these victories that Jesus achieved, these accomplishments that he performed, that his life achieved, they're through his fall. And because he was lowered, we get the benefits of it as if we had done it. The picture is if, because Jesus became flesh and blood like us, he bonded in a sense, I don't understand it, but he bonded with us. And therefore, when he got victory, God just looked at the whole team, like us, arm in arm with our big brother Jesus, and was like, you guys are victorious. Good job. I mean, all these benefits credited to you as if you had achieved them. That's just good news. That's just good news. You might just have to think about it a while and just kind of let it sink in. And it's not even the end of it. Because in verse 17, I don't mean to be like an infomercial guy, but wait, there's more. And there is. It says, therefore, he, Jesus, had to be like his brothers in every way, so that he could become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For since he himself was tested and has suffered, he is able to help those who are tested. So it's not only does all these benefits accrue to you, not only are you secured of these victories if you're a Christian, if you're in Christ, but he's there advocating for you, rooting for you, cheering for you, coaching you, advocating on your behalf to the Father. And he can do it because he's like you. He was made like you, and so he knows exactly what you're going through. And he can relate, and therefore he can be a successful advocate for you. And I hope in some way that just encourages you this morning. And I'm convinced that these things that we're talking about today, these truths, are meant to be the source of our identity and our security. The source of our identity and security, so that as we meditate on these things, as we absorb them and believe them and think about them and pray about them and take risks based on them and reach out and initiate and be vulnerable and do things that maybe we wouldn't otherwise do, that God helps us grow and mature, and he helps us become stronger, more secure in who we are. But I don't think that will happen by chance. I think that requires a laser-like focus on our behalf. Just exactly what Jonathan was talking about this morning. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And what does it say? Who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, scorning its shame, took away the power of the fall. That's inspiring to me. So much of this, I think, it's available to us in a way that we scarcely and rarely realize. And the image that I have, and I can't get this image out of my head, it's kind of like we're at a stream and we're sipping the water, you know, but we're kind of like, well, better be careful. This water could run. I don't know how much there is. But no, this is a river. It's like longer than the Amazon. It's wider than the Nile, and all this is available to you. But you must avail yourself of it. The things Jonathan talked about this morning. Taking spiritual risks that you only take because you believe this is who God has made you to be. I think that's something that's available to all of us. You know, if we don't, we're a little bit like me on my terrible, no good, very bad date. We've been green lighted. We've been made as secure as we can be. And here we are, wandering like a nincompoop down the streets of Riverside. Just do it, you know, you have been given this. At least use it. And I preach this to myself as much as you. You've been given a green light. You're good. You're secure. It takes a decision, though, to meditate on that, to focus on it, and then to let it change your actual behavior. To push into something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. I mean, what if I hadn't even asked my now wife to date that day and I just walked away? How sad, how ridiculous, right? But I've probably done that in other ways with my life. In a few moments, we're going to transition to communion. And this is something special that we do every week. If you're new, when you get a tray, you can just pass it by. That's just fine. It's something that we take seriously, and we want to focus our eyes on Jesus through this. And if you've been in fear, I want to ask you, you know, doesn't there come a time where you just look that fear, that bully inside your own skin in the eye, and you say, look, what do you got? Because I'm tired of being held down by you. I'm tired of being hemmed in. I'm tired of not doing things I feel like I should do. Isn't there a time to call that bluff? And even embrace the potential fall that you are afraid of? What if you do have a little spill? What if you do have a little fall? Is God going to be unequipped to deal with that? Listen, he can deal with it. He can support you in a time like that. Maybe it's not all fun and games, but guess what? That's okay. Like, fun and games all the time is good for kids, but not people who want to grow and mature and take spiritual risks and become more like Jesus, which is what we're being called to, I believe. At this time, we're going to focus our eyes on Jesus. Again, he provided the ultimate victories. We get the benefits of that. We get the spillover. We stand arm in arm with him. He's our older brother. We're his younger brothers and sisters. All those things accrue to you. Let's avail ourselves. Let's meditate. Let's focus. Let's take risks this week and this month that maybe you wouldn't last week. And we'll follow our big brother, Jesus, in the example that he set for us. Let's go ahead and pray. God, we do want to humbly come before you this morning and thank you. Thank you that Jesus was sent. Thank you that he achieved these things that are mind-blowing and so good that it's just really even hard, honestly, to get our minds around it. I do pray that this time can be a time, as we've talked about this morning, of great reflection, focus, and decisions of moving forward and how we want to do that. Thank you so much for the confidence and security and example that you've provided to us in Jesus. I pray that we're focused on him during this time and especially this week. Thank you for these opportunities. In Jesus' name, amen.